Hello, my name is Chandler Mayo, and I'm a developer advocate at Doppler. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how AI is potentially coming for your secrets. At Doppler, we're a developer-first secrets management platform. Usually when we think about secrets, we're thinking about things like API keys and certificates, and that's what we protect for developers with our platform. As such, we're constantly thinking about developers' needs, and AI is one of those things that has come up quite a bit recently. With all the different advancements and things that you can do with generative AI, there's definitely a risk to security, risking your secrets actually being exposed, or the wrong person, tricking an AI into revealing something that it shouldn't do. In tech, we usually want to move fast and break things. If you're too slow, your competitor will beat you to market. And generative AI is making that even more complicated because with generative AI, companies can also iterate faster and create things potentially faster. But there's a risk to security when it comes to that that's often underthought out. You want to move fast and break things, but also it doesn't really matter if you leak all of your customer data because you improperly use generative AI. Generative AI is also being used to do things like create more sophisticated phishing attacks. Phishing attacks are the bane of every security team, and chances are you probably had to go through training and have to go through it every year to learn how to avoid phishing attacks. A lot of us think phishing attacks are just something that, like, your grandma would fall for, and that's because traditionally they've worked by just sending out millions of emails to millions of users and trying to get just a small percentage of them to respond back. But with generative AI, things are getting a lot more complicated. With generative AI, you could scrape someone's profile, create a customized email, and target them directly and automate that across millions of users. So your response rate could go up significantly. You can also automate responses to them and make it sound really authentic and real. In the same space, deepfakes are also becoming extremely concerning. If you're able to replicate someone's image and their voice, you can create a really convincing story for someone who's not suspecting that. Like phishing attacks, ransomware attacks are also getting more sophisticated thanks to generative AI. Now, ransomware attacks can be almost entirely automated, which means you can do more of them at the same time. You can also customize them to go after individual targets better, because different companies are going to have different concerns, and you can exploit that. Another way that generative AI is leaking information is through jailbreaking it. A lot of companies are using AI to power different features of their platform, unaware that those AIs can be exploited to basically derail from their safeguards and expose things that they shouldn't. According to the State of Security 2024 report from Splunk, generative AI adoption is absolutely outpacing policy. And that's not really surprising because the technology is evolving faster than anyone can really think about how to use it. But that doesn't mean that companies shouldn't be identifying their potential use cases, establishing some sort of framework with ethical principles, outlining how they want to safeguard privacy, as well as educating their employees on how to use AI properly and designate accountability for who's responsible for AI. And then, of course, update and review the legal side of things. With all of these things to consider, overreactions are often a concern with generative AI. Some companies have decided that the best approach is to just not use it at all, and as a result, their engineering teams move slower. They can't create tests as fast, they can't create code as fast, but it might be necessary depending on their industry. But you have to face the consequences of that when your competitor is using generative AI to create stuff faster than you are. In most countries, AI regulation is still a patchwork because we're not totally sure what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to, but we do know that AI needs to be very carefully used in critical systems. The European Union recently passed the European Artificial Intelligence Act, or the AI Act. The idea of this is to basically leave simple uses of AI almost completely unregulated and only regulate it in high-risk environments and in high-risk software. This is a pretty common sense approach, but unfortunately, it'll have to continue to be adapted as AI evolves and as we continue to have other AI security concerns. Most of the time, the government being slow to embrace technology can work to different companies' advantages by giving them time to innovate before regulations are imposed. But in this case, AI can be extremely dangerous. It can expose user information in ways that we've never considered before. And so it's up to individual developers to make sure they're implementing it responsibly while the government catches up. Of course, it's not just developers who have access to API keys and secrets and data. So I'm going to leverage my team at Doppler to take a look at how different departments are leveraging AI and how they're thinking about the security of the AI features that they use. Would you please introduce yourself and your role at Doppler?
Yeah, so I'm Amber Britton. I'm head of go-to-market at Doppler. I oversee all of marketing, DevRel, and product growth. I have a team of 5, so a small little team, but we're responsible for generating traffic to Doppler, the product, at our marketing site, and then generating signups and leads to our sales team, as well as self-service customers.
How is your team using AI, and how are you as an individual using AI?
Yeah, for the team, we are definitely using AI to be more efficient. Every marketer I know pretty much is using AI in some way. So to help get you, 70-80% of the way there for some new project. In term, like mostly it's pretty superficial. Like we're using it for copy help in generating copy for social or copy ideas. From a security standpoint, in terms of like the data it ingests, we're very careful about what to give it, especially being at a company like Doppler. We do give it, I found the most benefit for the team is to give it data from different sources and help with analysis and synthesis of that data. Things that could take days or weeks can now be done in seconds. So thinking of like, there was an example where I took a bunch of our reviews from some third-party review sites, no identifiable information about who gave that review, but just the copy of it itself. Put that into GPT to look for different themes among that data about like pain points or benefits about our product that we could then use to distill both for the organization to know and then for future plans. So that's the kind of data. Occasionally, I might also give it some metrics data on like, here's some analysis on how many page views we had or clicks we had on something on our marketing site and over this period of time versus this period of time, and look for these differences or look for trends or themes or ideas. Again, not giving it any personally identifiable information about who did those visits or who the users were that contributed to those visits, but just the data itself, and help with reducing the time it would take to do that synthesis and analysis on your own. It's almost like having another team member who's, instead of having to necessarily hire a data analyst right now, we're getting the benefit of that help, or brainstorming with a virtual team member.
In the interest of data security, what rules do you think are most important for your team when using generative AI?
So it's definitely important to be on the same page about what data is allowed to go into an AI tool and what is not. For my team, like we're very clear on what's personally identifiable. That's very important to us as a company. So making sure we're not putting in, names of organizations that use us or information that could ever be traced back to a user. Not doing anything like that. That's why when I mentioned like we'll use high level metric data about performance of something, but not who contributed to that performance. In addition to that, I would also consider something sensitive to be about how the company is performing. We're a private startup. A lot of our customers are private startups. A lot of marketers I know are at private startups. Your financial information about how your company is performing is not public knowledge. And so anything that you don't want basically read aloud in a courtroom, you should not put into an AI tool. Unless you are the owner and creator of that AI tool potentially. So not putting in any information about how our company is doing financially, or that would be essentially personally identifiable to us and could be something that we didn't want public at this moment. And any other small startup would be in the same boat. So knowing that is maybe not the same level of what you think about in like, we're not putting API keys in. That's not something that's really relevant to my team most of the time, especially not with AI. But that other kind of data is still a security risk. You don't want that data getting out where it could be used against you in some sort of social engineering attack. Thinking about it like that, we're constantly trying to think ahead of those kinds of risks and make sure that we're not putting that data in place. And that extends to really any AI tool, which is difficult because every tool has some AI component. So making sure that those are properly vetted by whatever security team you may have, which we have a service that does that for us.
Great responses, Amber. Thank you. All right, now let's hear from our sales team. Would you please introduce yourself and your role at Doppler?
Yeah, my name is Adam. I'm the head of sales at Doppler. We work on both pre-sale and post-sale work with the customers. So we help new prospects engage with Doppler, evaluate if it makes sense for their organization, and pending them moving forward with us, we also maintain the relationship long term, ensuring that we help with their implementation and their long term expansion with us to drive revenue for the company.
How is your team using AI, and how are you as an individual using AI?
Pretty narrowly, really, we do our handful of work with ChatGPT, ghostwriting copy, and then adjusting it ourselves. But for the sake of mass writing or trying to write in bulk, we'll usually use ChatGPT for a handful of drafts and then iterate from there. Another place we use it is in our note taker. We use generative AI for transcriptions to easily write up the not only the summary but also the full transcription of the call. And then use those recordings for faster note taking to then post those notes internally for company visibility. And then personally, I use it on a service called Perplexity, which is like ChatGPT meets Google, to allow for getting the information I'm looking for and abstracting insights faster through a search engine.
In the interest of data security, what rules do you think are most important for your team when using generative AI?
Yeah, again, knowing that our team only really works with customer data and not anything on the back end, it's really like how we prompt rather. So when I talk to my team about this is our general practice of like not being too specific to a customer when it comes to like how we're ghostwriting a message or something like that. So we're not going to use like first names or emails or anything like that when we're writing out the customer name. We might use the company name just to make sure that the prompt that we're using has the context of the business, but we won't like reference the customer specifically. We won't reference their email. It's more so just to reference the high-level themes of their organization and why Doppler might make sense for them when it comes to like writing an email or writing a draft with ChatGPT. The goal really is just to keep it narrow in scope. Like when in doubt, we try and use it for very specific niche things instead of like having the default be to AI everything. Just with the sense of trying to keep it easy to manage and also reduce the potential vulnerability there.
Awesome responses, Adam. Thank you for your time. Now let's look into our engineering team and see how they're using AI and how they're doing it securely. Would you please introduce yourself and your role at Doppler?
I'm Nick Manoogian. I'm the head of engineering at Doppler, and our team builds Doppler.
How is your team using AI, and how are you as an individual using AI?
So Doppler is in a unique position of being a very highly trusted security tool. So we are very risk averse when it comes to any security related decisions. So one of the first things that we do when we're proposing any addition of new technology into our stack, generative AI included, is consulting our security team. So when we engage them, they've worked with a couple of other folks in the security space and have recommended against using any generative AI for any application logic within Doppler. And the engineering team has mixed feelings on this. This is a security recommendation from our consultants, not a official, not an official ruling, I suppose. So that's their recommendation. We have our choice of whether or not we want to comply. But they make some compelling arguments around not fully understanding the code that you're deploying, because there's a lot of ways a secret can leak. One of the ways that it can leak very easily is by accidentally logging or otherwise disseminating that secret from the application that is handling it, right? There is certainly one identity that absolutely needs the secret, and that's the service that's running your production applications. So it's really, really easy to accidentally log a network request containing the API key that you're using. It's really easy to accidentally log all of the configuration values, which would include secrets, when your application starts up. And when you're writing code by hand, you are thinking about what that code should be doing before you are reviewing it to make sure that it's correct, right? Like the process is, what do I want the computer to do? How do I want the service to behave? Then I write the code that matches that. Generative AI kind of flips the script there. When you ask it to, to write a service that handles network applications with 3 endpoints, for example, it's going to thumb all that out for you. And it determines how the service behaves. You go back and correct it, right? So you can imagine, like, if you were writing a service and you were looking at, the startup lines, for, the examples, you could make a decision on, oh, do I want to print out my environment variables or not, right? And you might at that stage be like, oh gosh, like the environment variables that I'm using here are sensitive, right? I should not print those to console because they'll end up in my logs in AWS or GCP. But if you see the code that's like, oh, it just says it's starting up and then it prints out like some configuration values. If you're not really thinking about what that's doing, it's like, it seems correct. And that's like a lot of what generative AI, I think, is like really bad at, is the things that it's, or I guess a risk of generative AI, the things that it can't really do still like look correct somehow. Like they sound right, or they seem right, but like once you start scratching at it a little bit, you're like, wait a minute, this is bad, this doesn't work, or like that's not actually accurate, it just seems like it. It's like, maybe not useful, but like it's really good at bullshitting. That's really, that's what it really truly excels at. Sounding right is like the hallmark of generative AI. Looking right is the hallmark of generative AI. So for that reason, our team does not use any generative AI for any application logic. This includes, our core backend services that handle secrets. It includes any of the like intermediary layers, like our API routes, and it also includes like our front end code, because those things are actually handling secrets. When you type a secret into the Doppler UI, that's probably one of the most sensitive spots where we could accidentally leak a value out of the DOM, because it's so easy to make network requests from that environment. So we do not use it at all in any application logic. And I think for that reason, our team gets less value out of it than maybe other engineering orgs would. The places where we do use it occasionally is for writing tests, boilerplate, things like that. I do use it quite frequently personally. I think my team does as well, for writing like one-off code scripts. Like I really don't like writing bash, and I don't know how many people really do, but it's pretty painful to like look up the syntax for all the specific things you need to do. Like I wrote a script the other day that was querying a DNS record on like 15 domains, and I was like, I want like the script to take in, a file, read it line by line. I'm like, I know it's like an IFS separator thing I'm supposed to do. It was so much easier to just write a prompt that was like, write me a script that does this thing. And then it writes, it's very good at that. And it's also really easy to review that code and make sure that it's doing what you expect it to do. Because it's usually for very simple applications. And it's really good at that. And then, if you know the language, you can make little adjustments and tune it up.
In the interest of data security, what rules do you think are most important for your team when using generative AI?
I think, somewhat obviously, the number one thing is really make sure that the code is doing what you expect it to be doing. It's really easier said than done. Be thoughtful around what patterns you're introducing. Like there are practical security implications to this, like make sure the code isn't logging secrets someplace, or make sure that it isn't repeating a pattern that actually has a vulnerability, right? Something that it found on Stack Overflow or has been done over and over and is problematic. Easier said than done. There are also practical, non-security related, but like performance things. There might be a very common way to implement something that has less than favorable performance characteristics. And it's something that you might have known if you were writing the code. You would have said, oh, wow, this is actually a lot of iterations over this array. But if you're just accepting it and checking it for correctness, then yeah, it looks pretty good. It works. All the tests pass. So I think just being very thoughtful around the uses of generative AI in your application logic, making sure that it behaves how you expect it to behave, in addition to, is it correct behavior? Also be asking, how could this be exploited? Really, really put the code through the ringer like you would for a new developer on your team.
So as you can see, different departments use generative AI in different ways, but a lot of their security concerns are similar or the same. Considering this, it's important to make sure that you have a company-wide AI policy that reflects the needs of your organization at a level that's most appropriate for you. I hope you found this presentation helpful and got some insights into things you should think about regarding AI and data security. If you'd like to reach out to me, please send me an email at chandler.mayo@doppler.com. Thank you for watching.